Hello. Lots to talk about today. The word of the day is chase. Chasing number 61, chasing magic number 2, and chasing the Red Sox right out of the Bronx. We'll talk about it next on the upper deck. Hello and welcome to the Upper Deck from Pinstripe Chronicles. I'm Lynn. Chris Northrup is away enjoying some family time, and joining me is our special guest, Deb Seymour. Deb, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you. Happy to be here again.
Yes, so always so great to have you. So before we jump in, Deb, I did want to ask you, what's new from your writing lens, and is there anything you want to share with us from your latest articles? What your website's up to? You work with Bullpen.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because we did see some very, very good productivity and production from Harrison Bader this week. And when he had been traded to the Yankees for Jordan Montgomery, I did write a piece about Bader on my personal blog, my personal sports blog. And so that is available to be read still. I did tweet the link back out this week again for the Bader piece, but anybody who wants to go to the link in my bio on Twitter can find the Harrison Bader piece on my blog. In addition to that, I have written most recently for Ball 9 about a day that I spent at a AA ballpark, and it was one of Giancarlo Stanton's rehab assignment days, which is why I went there in particular to see Giancarlo in his rehab. And so that piece is available on Ball 9. And the following piece,
article, everyone needs to read it.
Thank you. Yeah, I enjoyed the game and really enjoyed writing about my experience at AA this year with all the experimental things that are going on, such as the pitch clock and the zero shift and all of that.
Right.
In particular, about watching Stanton, although Stanton had no hits in the game. Then I wrote a piece that is sort of a tribute to both O'Neill Cruz of the Pirates and Paul O'Neill of the Yankees, and their sort of special relationship in some sense. So that's another piece that's on the Ball 9 website. And finally, this week I have, and just as an update on a piece that I have coming out on Ball 9 this coming Wednesday, it'll be about robot umps and the status of robo-umps or robot umps, whatever you prefer to call them, the TrackMan system and how it's being used in the minors, and the fact that we may be seeing it in the majors by 2024, what the pros and cons of the TrackMan system are, and how people currently feel about it and how they may feel about it once it's actually instituted at the MLB level.
I'm looking forward to that update, having read the first article you did about your trip down to the double A's. So I guess at the top here, we should probably get the obvious top line item now, and then we'll get to the regular things we covered during any other week. So we know Judge is still chasing number 61. So how do you think things look for that? What are you noticing in Judge in what feels to the fans like an interminable wait?
I think it feels like an interminable wait because Judge and we are all very conscious of the fact that he's running out of games in which to accomplish the great feat. So he's sitting at 60 and he has been for only several games. But of course, at this point in the season, every game feels like probably 5 games or 10 games because every day you cross off the calendar at this point, you know that the number of games he has left in which to accomplish this feat is becoming much more limited. So, we as fans, I think, are getting impatient, not just because every single game you watch, every at-bat, and if the production isn't there, then you start to worry, but, start to worry about the production period. And then in addition, you wonder whether the record will be broken. But I think on Judge's end, personally, I do think he's beginning to feel that pressure, and we're starting to see it in his at-bats. So, in his plate appearances, I should say, whether he walks or gets a single or double or strikes out or actually hits the home run, I think the past couple of games that I've watched, at least, didn't get to watch the entire game yesterday, but at least the beginning of it, and the previous day, the entire game, it looked to me like Judge is starting to press at the plate. And we know he is an intelligent enough player and hitter that eventually he will find his stroke again and not miss good strikes in the zone, and not miss very good pitches, and not pop them up, and not do, things that lead to a strikeout. But at the moment, what we're seeing from him, at least over the past couple of games, is something we haven't seen in a very long time. And it's not representative of what his season at the plate has been like. And I do think that's due to the pressure. And Lynn, you and I briefly talked before this broadcast about the fact that, some of these games, especially against the Red Sox, have been nationally televised, and there are even more eyes. And tonight, of course, will be. And there are even more eyes on him, and whether Judge maybe feels some of the pressure of that. But I don't think so. I think he's starting to feel the games tick off the calendar. And if I understand him at all, and of course I don't, having the distance from him as a player that I have, but having watched him all these years, I would say if he's feeling any internal pressure, it's because the games are becoming fewer and fewer for him to hit that 61 and 62. I don't think that has anything to do with the audience. I don't think it has anything to do with whether it's a local broadcast or a national broadcast. It may have something to do with the fact that the Marises are present in the ballpark now for every single at bat. But I think it's more that he knows he has fewer and fewer games to get this done, and he's probably starting to put some pressure on himself.
Yeah, and I would agree with that on all counts. And the Maris family was interviewed Friday night, and also I believe yesterday as well. And they've been asked, have you had the opportunity to meet with Judge? And they said they haven't, and they prefer it that way. That
Mm-hmm.
they want him to be able to focus, and they don't want to be a distraction, and they want to just be very low key. They'll have their moment with him, and in the booth, Kay concurred that the Yankees have something special planned when that moment comes. I'm not going to say if, because I'm not going to be tagged as the one that jinxes anything. So I just think a real sign of class from the Maris family.
Yes.
As well here. It's bittersweet, of course, and they're very clear about that. But their support, is outstanding.
I do think it's outstanding. And just one final note, I do think that, and I've thought this in the entire time that this chase has been going on, I do think Judge is more likely to hit 61 and perhaps even 62 in a not home ballpark, because the whatever internal pressure he's feeling, although I think it's mostly related to the number of games he has left, it's very hard to shut out all the noise. And when you do it at home, the pressure becomes greater, or when you're attempting, I should say, to do it at home, the pressure is greater. And I think if you do it, are attempting to do this kind of thing on the road, there is not that same kind of pressure. And I do think if and when he does it, it probably will be on the road.
Yes, which I know any Yankee fan listening who's buying tickets for this, would really hope that we're wrong about that. And not only in the plate are we seeing the emotional reaction starting to come out, but his return to the dugout a few times.
Yes.
He had emotions on his sleeve, which is not like Judge. Just
That's
like
right.
it wasn't like Jeter, as we were talking about before the show. And so in a way it's good, because it's a good reminder for everybody that he's human, for crying out loud. And also, that he cares, he wants it. We all knew that, but just really hope he doesn't get deep inside his head. And all
Right.
signs are that he's not, because case in point, yesterday, when there was a home run right after his very quick return to the clubhouse by Rizzo, he was like just lights on and first guy over the gate, and so he still is the one that just wants to be the team guy, wants to win, wants to see his teammates succeed.
I think that's true. And of course, he and Rizzo are very close friends, but independently of that,
Right.
obviously he is a team guy, and what he's more interested in ultimately is a win and a deep postseason run if the Yankees can achieve that. I think that's way more important to him than what happens with the Maris record. But I think speaking of a deep postseason run, that brings us to some of the other topics that we
Yep.
wanted to talk about today in the time that we have.
Yeah. So let's go to the rest of the team, because it's not all rainbows and sunshine. Uh,
No, it is not.
let's talk. Let's start with the pitching.
I,
Um,
I do, yes.
yeah. Go ahead, Deb. Jump right in. Go for it.
I do think the Yankees have a number of pitching challenges at this point. I mentioned Bader at the very top of the show, and I don't think that people feel as strongly as some of us did early on after the trade of Montgomery for Bader that was a bad trade and that we really needed Montgomery. And what kind of business did Cashman have doing that? I think Bader's contributions are starting to show themselves, and Montgomery's pitching for the Cardinals is starting to come back down to earth. So it's not the trade is starting to look a little more balanced at this point, but in terms of other pitching issues the Yankees have, certainly Cole is a giant issue, and he has been in big game situations the entire time that he's been pitching for the Yankees. Now, there's always been an excuse, but independently of the excuses, we know just from his behavior on the field that this is an emotional guy. He has trouble reining in his emotions in the game situation. It's not just that he got tossed after yelling at the umpire in his last game, but it's also that he's starting to show a pattern of every time he gets annoyed with a really bad call against him, or at least a very questionable call against him, the next pitch turns into a home run by the opponent. And we have seen a pattern of this now. It hasn't just happened once. Now, in a game that doesn't matter, where there's not much at stake, okay, that can happen to any pitcher. But in a big game situation, that just cannot happen, whether you're the ace of the staff or not. And we're starting to see a pattern of this with Cole, and I think it's a problem for the Yankees, and I think it's a problem for him personally, and I think he needs to figure out a way to rein it in.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And whether it's because of, a bad call from the ump, or, getting hit on, that's it. That we know that's the end of the game for him.
Yeah,
He just doesn't bounce back. And unfortunately, these things tend to happen at the beginning of the game, in the first through third inning. And we're not even getting the length from him for the most times. And when do we start to say he's not our ace?
I mean, I do think that we have seen him bounce back at times. So there are games in which he's given up a home run or two in the first inning, and then he goes on to have 5 or 6 very good innings. So I don't think it's true across the board that he doesn't bounce back, but let's just say 50% of the time he does and 50% of the time he doesn't, and those are not good stats for somebody who's supposed to be the ace of the staff. He's still the ace of the staff, there's no question. He leads the league in strikeouts. He's not been hurt, he's been available. He's not been somebody who has been constantly out of the rotation because of injury, and he's still your big game pitcher. I believe
Okay.
you start him in your big games. But what he does need to come to grips with is what are his emotions in those situations. Whether it's that he's not throwing his best pitches in the first inning due to nerves and pressure, or whether it's that he has a bad reaction to something that happens in the game and then he just grooves one for a home run. Either way, if there's an internal emotional response, that's what he needs to get under control. I believe if he can control that, he truly does become the ace of the staff.
And
And he,
oh, go ahead.
I mean, I think he is the ace of the staff. I think he shows himself to be the ace of the staff.
Yeah.
Who else is the ace? Nestor Cortez. I know people make jokes about that he's the actual ace, but he has a very unusual delivery, and he's been very, very successful this year, but he just does not have the track record to be called an ace of any staff. I'm sorry. I just can't buy into that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that's mostly, joking. But I think as fans, there's more of an obvious payoff, um, from Nestor for the fans.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think like the things you were just describing are causing frustration for the fan base, because we know what Cole is capable of, but by and large, with those exceptions you mentioned, where he shakes it off because it's really early in the game, it works against everything about the game. So whereas Nestor, as we know, is nonplussed, I haven't seen him shaken yet. But yes, he
Once or
doesn't have.
twice, but
Yeah,
not regularly, not at the rate that Cole seems to be. But of
right,
course, there isn't that pressure on Nestor that there is on Cole to be the
right,
ace.
right, right.
You
So
know, if he were with a big contract guy who felt like he really has to earn that, that over $400 million and um, was supposed to be the big game pitcher and had all of that attached to him, which he does not, Nestor, we do not know how he would react under those circumstances. So it's all ceteris paribus right now that we've seen sort of more consistent production out of Nestor than we have out of Cole.
So what do you? We make the postseason. I mean, that's a given. But we clinched the division, and we have to shore up our resources. What's the rotation you're looking at, Deb?
I do think Cole is the ace. I think the second pitcher probably would be Cortez. I think the plan was for it to be Montas. Obviously, that's a big question mark now. That trade looks more questionable to me than the Montgomery trade at this point.
Yep.
I'm sure there were very good medicals provided by the A's to the Yankees, and the Yankees did their own checking before they actually traded for him, given that he was coming off such a recent injury and all these really good pitching prospects were traded for him. However, it just is not looking like a really good trade at this moment in time. Now, maybe by next year, if he's healthy and he really is an excellent pitcher for the Yankees, it'll look like the trade was worth it. But at this moment in time, it's not looking like that. So then where does Tyone fit in? So, if your ace is going to be Cole, and let's say Nestor is number 2, potentially, is Tyone number 3? And then there's Severino. Now, I really do think the other ace of the staff is Severino.
Yes.
The problem is he was out for so long with injury that I do think he should be the number 2 in the rotation. But will there be in the postseason? But will there be time enough for him to show that he's capable of that prior to the end of the season? That's the question. So I do think Severino is going to be the 4th pitcher besides Cole, Cortez, and Tyone. But the question is what the sequence will be of those pitchers in the rotation, given what we see from Severino still before the end of the season.
Yep. And we have a comment from our friend Spencer about Montas. He says even if Montas hadn't gotten injured, his pitching was so underwhelming that he doesn't even feel confident with him making the postseason roster. He would get my vote to be excluded. And I think you just said what Spencer's thinking, that
So here's always the chicken and egg question with pitchers who don't perform well, and especially those who have come off injury, such as Montas, and such as Domingo Germán or somebody like that. The question is, are they pitching badly because there was an injury and they just aren't fully recovered yet? So Montas, we know, only had 4 starts for the A's before the Yankees traded for him.
Yeah.
So he was still so close to coming off the IL for the A's that the question is, did the really questionable, poor quality starts he had for the Yankees reflect the fact that he was still not completely healthy? Right. Or were they just that he was pitching badly? And my suspicion is it's not that he was just pitching badly. I think he was still injured, or at least not fully recovered, and that's how he wound up back on the IL at this point. Right. If somebody's pitching injured and they do badly, you can't really blame them for that. Then the question becomes, how is he ever put in a situation where he's expected to pitch well if he's really still injured? And that comes down to doing due diligence on the medical side.
Right.
And I mean, none of us are privy to exactly what due diligence was done by the A's when they took him off the IL and by the Yankees when they acquired him.
Right. And I think that speaks to what Boone was saying about it very well could be that it's going to be hodgepodge lodge, not his words.
Right.
In terms of how each night will go, each game will go, let alone the rotation.
Well, that's certainly true of the bullpen. Yeah.
And even with, I agree with the order you've put so far. Tyone has had two disappointing appearances, so but we don't have the luxury of you know we don't have the luxury we thought we would have at the beginning of the season. And
That's
Herman
right.
had a disappointing outing yesterday, and so really we're at we're at three pitchers that um, are somewhat solid. Well, Tyone's somewhat solid. He belongs at number three for now. Sevy should be number two. Will he stretch out enough in time for the postseason to really be back? I mean, he was out on a heart injury, and it's just Herman. We were really counting on him, and I just don't know how that's going to shake out and how many opportunities he's going to be given. There was
I mean, I wasn't counting on him to be in the starting rotation for the postseason. I was counting on him being in the bullpen.
Yeah, and that's what it's looking like. Um, so, um, so that's a concern heading into the postseason for sure.
Absolutely.
It's a concern now.
All
Uh,
of the pitching is a concern heading into the postseason.
right.
It's ironically the concern had been the hitting initially, at least with
Yeah.
respect to the postseason, because Carpenter and DJ. Well, we don't even know if DJ is going to be able to go by the postseason, and then there's Carpenter, who may be back by the postseason. He'd like to be, but who knows? And Ben Tendi, who turned out to be a really important piece, who was added. Big question as to whether he's going to be able to go in the postseason as well. So, if the if the Yankee roster, apart from the pitching, is in a situation where there is no Carpenter, there is no Benintendi, and there's no DJ LeMahieu, is this a team that can win no matter who their rotation is? And I think that's one of the big questions for the postseason. But I think we're starting to hit the point where the more overriding question is the pitching going to be such a concern that it doesn't matter that Carpenter, Benintendi, and DJ may not be on the field?
Right. Yeah, and I would agree with that. And even though the home fires are still burning while they're gone because of Cabrera, guys like Cabrera and Bader, who you mentioned, and I do
Mm-hmm.
have to take back some of my jokes from earlier in the season now. Happy to, eat crow on that. But, it's beyond the starting rotation. The bullpen has huge concerns. We were waiting for Britain this whole season, and another just big disappointment. I don't think he's necessarily ready. It was a brief appearance. He'll be given another shot, but it's a question mark rather than a given with him.
Of course, it's a question mark, and for somebody to re-enter the bullpen after such a very, very lengthy time away, one can't really expect the first appearance to be lights out. And
Right.
even if it were, I would still find that questionable because, okay, one lights out appearance, and then all of a sudden, he becomes shaky because he just hasn't hit his rhythm and isn't able to do this consistently. So yeah, it's a question as to whether Britain makes the postseason roster as well. Definitely. What happened with Herman yesterday seemed to be a bit of a deviation. I don't think it's been his norm. He's been pretty reliable lately. I hope it's not indication of injury. I haven't heard anything, but you never know. And the rest of the bullpen has either been injured or is just coming back from injury. We have folks like Trevino and Efros who, have had a missed time at some point or at various points during the season. And so even though some of these pitchers seem to be really good acquisitions, the fact that they've had to miss time makes you question the consistency of everybody in that bullpen at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Um, I think the bullpen is a very big question mark, and I think it's the biggest question mark with which the Yankees are going into the postseason. Ironically, because in all of their recent postseason runs that have gone deeper than a one-game loss, let's say to the Red Sox, the bullpen has been their strength and not their weakness. And this year seems to be the first year in quite a while in which going into the postseason, the bullpen may actually be the weakness and the biggest question mark.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and we'll see how far we'll be stacking that bullpen. Um,
Mhm.
Literally just trusting each guy with an inning, see how it goes, and then bring the next one right in. um,
Mm-hmm.
because of that. It has been good to see Holmes straighten himself out a little
Yeah,
bit
a
the
little
past
bit.
couple times. Yeah, I said little for a reason, um, and we'll see from there. Still kind of iffy to me, and yeah, it's just and Spencer just concurred about Tyon. It's more of a relief than an of course when
Yeah.
Tyon jumping back to the rotation does the thing. But yeah, the bullpen again, another thing that we were so excited about start of season because pitching had always been our unicorn to find. It's just not playing out that way.
It isn't, and you and I had talked about this briefly before the show. That Joel Sherman mentioned late last night that there is a question as to whether the Yankees are even going to DFA Chapman before the end of the season, so that other people can get a good look and that the roster spot becomes available. So that I think that's a pretty good indication that if reporters who are closer to the Yankees than I am, if they are already saying there's a question as to whether Chapman may be DFA'd even before his contract is up, that the Yankees are considering what they're going to do about that bullpen and really want to give enough people a shot that they feel a little more solid about the bullpen before they actually have to face their first opponent in the postseason. Of course, we don't know yet exactly whom that's going to be. The assumption is the Yankees will get a bye and they can do a lot of sort of off-field and on-field practice, work during that time if they choose to. But nevertheless, until you're in a game situation, we still won't know exactly what we have even in the postseason.
They better choose to. They better consider it a have to. And I'm going to bounce a little bit because you said DFA. And so, we know that Andujar has been DFA'd,
Yes.
but fans have been crying for a long time about DFAing Hicks. Now, if they're considering DFAing Chapman with his contract still live, why is there no buzz about doing the same for Hicks?
Because Hicks is under contract for another 3 years and Chapman's contract is up in a week.
Right, but dollars to donuts, and I know Hal's all about the donuts, but we've eaten other huge contracts before, and yet Hicks, keeps auditioning, and when he's auditioning under the biggest pressure, he's producing
Right.
during this series. But this consideration of about Chapman, which would be very well received, I think, by the fan base if done, does come as a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
But
But from the dollars and cents point of view, it would make much more sense than DFAing somebody like Hicks.
Yeah.
Because the Yankees then would have to pay him for a few games that he doesn't play, as opposed to having to pay him for 3 years that he doesn't play. Now, the assumption is, I think, throughout the media and elsewhere, that Hicks will be traded in the offseason. And there's a big question as to whether he'll even make the postseason roster. So essentially, it may turn into the equivalent of a DFA situation by the end of the season from the point of view of playing time if he doesn't make the postseason roster and he is traded in the offseason. And he's essentially asked for a trade, even though he hasn't said it in exactly that way publicly to the media. He has asked for a trade, and I think the Yankees will do whatever they can to accommodate that because he just hasn't given them the productivity they bargained for. Now, they probably will have to eat most of his contract even if they trade him, but you want to still get as much value for him as you can. If you DFA him right now, you get nothing. If you wait till the end of the postseason run, at least you might get something for him.
Right, I know. That's where emotions and business will never hit the road at the same time.
Baseball is a business just like any other, and criticize Hal as you may, and as many others have and continue to. He's running a business, and Cashman is running a business, and the dollars and cents and how they're spent have to make the most sense to those two that they can. Right. And I'm not saying they always do, and I'm not saying I agree with all of their decisions, because I certainly do not. However, we don't know exactly what financial pressures they're under. I think most fans assume there's just the luxury tax, and that's the only pressure from the financial point of view that the team is under. But I don't think that's the case. I think there are estate taxes involved, in terms of the team having been inherited from George, and there are all kinds of other issues that come into play with the Yankees' finances. And so, yes, it's a business. They're going to run it as a business.
Yep. Can't blame them there, even though we will. So looking ahead, we're heading to Toronto for two.
Yep.
What are your thoughts about what we're looking at? Will we be clinching there? Clinching tonight would be magical because
Clinching tonight would be, of course, the best.
right,
If the
which
Yankees can sweep the Red Sox and win tonight, and then Tampa loses, obviously that would be the best case scenario.
yeah,
The next best case scenario would be to be able to clinch the next day and beat Toronto on Monday. You know, the big question for me is not whether whether and when the Yankees clinch, because it will happen within the next 3 days, let's just say, which still leaves another, let's say, 7 games in the season. The question for me is what they're going to do afterwards. Are they going to rest all their players, knowing that they have a bye coming up, during which players will rest anyway, or will they, still play to win in order to? First of all, it would be nice to try to at least attempt to hit 100 wins for the season, especially after the first half this season that this team had. The second half unfolded, extremely differently, obviously. But secondly, playing to win toward the end of the season could keep the team hot for the postseason. And if you start resting everybody and then there's a bye, I think you lose an awful lot of momentum by the time the postseason starts.
yeah,
So there's got to be a good balance in there so that the momentum going into the postseason is not completely lost. That's my belief in any event.
right. And the scales really need to balance in the favor of working and not napping, which
Yeah.
Boone has been very favorable for. Resting guys when you have to wonder why now they're hot. So hopefully that'll be the case and they'll capitalize. They'll also need to keep the momentum just emotionally, psyche wise going.
That's a
Which
big part of what I'm talking about.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And we of course don't know where Judge will be in the home run chase at that point. So maybe he'll get to DH sometimes, especially if if and when they clinch. Hicks may see more time in the field before the end of the season, whether people like that or not, just to be able to get Judge off his feet a little bit before the postseason starts, and
right,
still get him at bats to get him the plate appearances to be able to break this Maris record. But right now, because of the situation where you want to clinch the division, I think that's one of the reasons we've been seeing Judge in the field every single day, and not some other substitutes such as LoCastro and Hicks,
right,
because you want to clinch, and then you get Judge off his feet, and he gets to DH a little bit, and you see some of the quote weaker productivity players in the field a little bit more. I do think we will see a little bit more of that once the clinching occurs.
right, right. Well, so we end each week with the trivia question of the week.
Yeah.
And so here it is for this week. Um, and I think this is kind of a gimme. I was feeling kind of generous this week. What Yankees outfielder supplied Bucky Dent with a new bat just before the shortstop hit his infamous home run over the Green Monster in the 1978 one-game playoff between the Bombers and the Red Sox?
That's a great question.
Um, so, as usual, no lifelines, don't phone a friend, be a good scout, no Googling. But please do comment below with your answers. For those of you that are watching live, thank you so much. For those of you that are watching after, thank you very much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us every week. Make sure to check out the podcasts by our Pinstripe Chronicles guys. We're part of the family, and they're also at the same YouTube channel. Don't forget to check Deb and all of her fabulous work on ball9.com and bigapplebite.com.
That's right.
And of course, if you're not following her on Twitter, why? Her name is right there on the screen. That's her, so at Deb Seymour. And so thank you again. Remember, you always have a reserve seat right here on the upper deck. And let's go, Yankees.
Let's go, Yankees. Thank you so much for having me.
You, Deb. It's been a pleasure. Thanks again.
Thank you.